Good evening, everybody. This is Dino Patijalal from Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, and I am happy to welcome all of you to tonight's discussion, where we will discuss the future of Palestinian statehood and the implications of the Israel's plan of annexation of the West Bank. Despite the world being in the war against COVID-19, unfortunately, there are other things are progressing in ways that are giving concern to all of us, and this is especially so with the situation in the Middle East, especially with regard to the Arab-Israeli conflict. President Trump's Middle East plan, which was presented in January earlier this year, significantly favors Israel. And there is this attitude of take it or leave it in proposing this deal that leaves the Palestinians completely out of the discussions. And the United States is backing the Israeli annexation of the West Bank that they say will take place in early July. And obviously, this is a matter of concern for everybody. And I suppose this is going to play into the dynamics of US politics. But in any case, 47 UN human rights experts have condemned this annexation as a vision of 21st century apartheid. And this denunciation is already welcomed by the Palestinian government also. And the European Union has also opposed the action, claiming it to be incompatible with international law, and is currently seeking dialogue with Israel. The Palestinian government, in the meantime, have submitted an alternative plan to the diplomatic quartet of the UN, United States, Russia, and the EU. So this is the situation on the ground. Diplomatically, it's heating up, and the actors on the ground are also feeling the heat, and there's a lot of resistance to this. The Indonesian government has also registered this protests at the plan of Israel to annex the West Bank, as many other governments around the world, including much of the Islamic world. So that is the background of situation, and we are very happy to have three prominent speakers that will shed their views to enlighten us. One is we have Ambassador Zuhair, Ambassador of Palestine to Indonesia. And he is very popular in our country, and we hope to hear him describe the views and perspective of Palestinian government on this latest development. We have Ambassador Trian Jani, our permanent representative to New York, who is at the front line on this issue. And as you know, the Indonesian government, for our membership at the UN Security Council, has made the Palestine issue one of its key priorities. So we'd love to hear his take on this latest development. And of course, last but not least, Pak Din Samsudin, who is one of the iconic figures in Muhammadiyah, but he's also the chairman of Indonesia-Palestine Friendship Society. And he's also the chairman of the Center for Dialogue and Cooperation Among Civilizations. He's a gigantic figure, Islamic leader in Indonesia, and we would love to hear his views on this. So I will turn first to Pak Trian Jani, our permanent representative at the UN, to give us his views. Ambassador Trian, the floor is yours. The microphone is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ambassador Dino. It's an honor and privilege to be here today. I do have to apologize first in the front that I might have to leave not until the end, simply because there are some new development. They are going to honor our fallen soldiers in MONUSCO by the Secretary General. So I have to be present in this open VTC, aside from others, Security Councils, emergency that are brewing. So just a disclaimer first. Another disclaimer also, to be able to speak freely, I would like to at least put on record that I'm speaking on my own personal capacity here, so that it would be a much more easier conversation on my part. I'm honored once again, and actually, if you have Professor Din Samsudin here, an expert on this issue of Palestine, you don't need me here, Ambassador Dino, and of course we have our dear colleagues, the Ambassador of the Palestine. And I think you already at least highlighted several of the important points, so that makes my job much easier. If I may, on these particular issues, now we are at a very crucial junction of history. As you mentioned, Dino, the world is looking at what Israel is going to do, this issue of annexation that are looming in front of us. But let me share some of the points that at least the way we look at it. First, on the nature of the threat itself, the threat of annexation. This annexation of Israel of Palestinian land is simply unacceptable and for a number of reasons. First, through formal means, it is something that, well, actually, to be frank, there is already a de facto creeping annexation that I like to use that word. Slowly but surely, there are creeping annexation to many areas of the occupied Palestinian territories. But now, this proclamation of some members of the Israel politician, as well as the intention of annexation, and if it becomes formal, it becomes more dangerous than ever. It's a calamity for us all. Actually, this is nothing new. And one thing that is quite clear is that if this action is being taken, it's clearly a violation of all the international law, humanitarian law, all the resolution of the United Nations, including Security Council Resolution of 2334 of 2016, which clearly define the illegality of all these settlements, this annexation, these efforts by Israel. It's a continuously threat to the rights of every Palestinian to establish a sovereign, contiguous, and independent state within the pre-1967 borders and with East Jerusalem as its capital. So if this action is being taken, it's clearly violation of international law, but more importantly, it will kill the whole peace process. It will destroy any hope for peace in the region based on a two-state vision. I think I would like to underline this very important fact. And it would set back years of diplomatic efforts and the prospect of peace, including which was built on through the Oslo Accords. Another important point that I would like to highlight on the consequences of annexation is that it would also cause regional stability and beyond. We cannot predict what would be the backlash, but one thing for sure that this will not be taken lightly in all parts of the world. And what is also important to note of the consequences of annexation is that it would also create a dangerous precedent to international law and international humanitarian law. It will also question the basic tenacity of sovereignty. It would entail impunity from implementing various international laws, resolutions, and norms. Once annexation happens, there is no way back. And thus I come to my second point, which is the need for the international community to stop the annexation from going forward. If we fail, all of us, the international community, will go down in history as the ones who betrayed the norms and order that we hold profoundly. I just would like to underline this particular special point by quoting what is enshrined in the United Nations Charter, which is the first line of the UN Charter, to save succeeding generation from the scourge of war. So if this annexation takes place, it will be basically against the UN Charter. For us, Indonesia, as you mentioned, Ambassador Dino, we have done all our part. It has been an integral part of the Indonesian foreign policy as mandated by our constitution. I've myself hold this very dearly because this is one of the promises of the Asia-Africa Bandung Conference that we have never, not yet fulfilled. Because of the 1955 Bandung Conference, there are many countries that become independent. So this is the last remaining promises of our Bandung 1955 Asia-Africa Conference. So for us, in our foreign policies, this has, to previous government, this has always been our marching points. We have been consistently urging collective efforts by the international community through many avenues, bilateral, regional, multilateral, in order to have a credible multilateral peace process. The question here and the key here is to have an internationally agreed parameters and to show Israel, both by words and action, that annexation is illegal, unacceptable, and against human rights. I would like to underline this point, against human rights. Just to also look at it from the point of view of us here in the multilateral framework, Resolution 2334, which is a landmark resolution on this issue, provide means to do just that. It calls on all states to distinguish the relevant dealings between the territory of Israel and the territories occupied since 1967. Consequently, no state shall uphold the violation of Israel or offer support in any way to such violation. That is the wording in those resolutions. So we have the legal rights, we have the rights to also question this breach of international law. In practical terms, states should also consider action not only to recognize the state of Palestine for those that have not done so, but to introduce possible measures to Israel in accordance with international law. I think that is quite clear. I come to my third point, and let me share with you some of the measures that Indonesia have been taking to advance the Palestinian cause. As a member of the Security Council, where I sit now, we have initiated various Security Council meetings to respond to alarming development in the ground since we joined the Security Council. And even before we joined the Council, as a member of the United Nations, we have been working closely with Ambassador Zuhair colleagues, Minister Riyad Mansour, who's the PR of Palestine in New York. We have coordinated our action, including coming up with the GA resolution that are quite instrumental when we have this question of moving the capital to Jerusalem. We have also initiated Security Council negotiation on draft resolution just this year, as people have already known from the media. But of course, the situation, once again, everything has to be consulted, and we are consulting with our Palestinian brother and sister on the way forward. We have also ensured that initiating outcome documents when there are any occurrence which relate to the issue of Palestine, including the temporary international presence in Hebron. We successfully initiated a press element on COVID-19 situation in Palestine. This is another issue that we have to take into account. This looming annexation is also taking place during the COVID time, and this also caused difficulties. The numbers of COVID fatalities in the occupied Palestinian territories is also becoming more and more prevalent, notwithstanding the fragile health system in the Middle East, in many countries in the Middle East, including in the Palestine area. We also held an area formula meeting on Israel's illegal settlement in May 2019, when we were president of the Security Council in May 2019 of last year. The intention is quite simple: to continue to preserve the momentum of this issue of Palestine, to ensure that although there are so many other issues that are creeping up in the world today, people will not forget that this is one issue that we have to settle. In the wider UN context, I'm also a member, Ambassador, as the Vice Chair of the UN Committee on Palestine, which is the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. It's a mouthful, to be frank. It has a simple abbreviation, which is SERP. But basically, this committee is a UN committee which is tasked to organize the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people to achieve independence for Palestine. We have organized various campaign programs. We have even visiting several countries to ensure support, especially for those that have not yet being decided on. I myself have traveled to Nicaragua, Tanzania, and the committee has traveled to every corner of the world. We have also, during this COVID, also used the social media. The FPCI invited many speakers, particularly the last few months when this idea of annexation comes into being, to ensure that we have garnered support not only around the world but also inside of the United States. So we invited speakers not only from the West Bank, from Palestine, but also Israeli speakers that are supporting this cause, giving a different framework on the legal aspect of it. So there's lots of things that have been done. One more important point is also we continue to support UNRWA. Indonesia has been in the forefront, and as people might know also that the spending, the financial situation of UNRWA, the United Nations agency in charge of refugees, is also in dire situation simply because some countries have cut their support and contribution. But the good side of it is that we had several pledging conferences, and lastly, last week, where Indonesia also quite clearly contributed in the pledging conference millions of dollars in UNRWA. UNRWA is quite important because not many people know this agency, but the task is quite simple. There are 4 camps. There are more than 5 million refugees, Palestinian refugees, all around 4 areas. They provide schooling, they provide education, health, and everything. So this is also an issue that becomes a danger if the the peace plans comes into being. This refugee will not be able to come back to their homeland. I'm not going to go too long because I know I'm only limited the timing. But we make sure also that in terms of the Security Council, we garner the support of the NAM, the Non-Aligned Movement Caucus, within the Security Council to coordinate on advancing the Palestinian cause. Aside from many issues that have been taken up by Indonesia as a country, as you know, our president, our minister is quite active. Is very active. She just sent letters to many of her counterparts, once again to highlight that the act of Israel to annex the occupied territories of Palestinian territories is against the law, against international law, it's a breach of international commitment. So Minister Masurdi have lobbied all around the world. Our delegation also at every level have done quite an enormous job in trying to come up with an initiative in the OIC as well as in other grouping also. Just to highlight what we have been doing in trying to garner support. I think just last week on the pledging conference, we once again underlined that we are providing $1 million to the government of Palestine to address COVID-19 pandemic, $1 million for UNRWA, COVID-19 flash appeal, operational budget and humanitarian appeal, and 500,000 through the ICRC. My 4th point, and I hope it's the last one, is the reaction of the international community. Just to give a little brief history of what's happening here in New York. Just last week, we managed to garner the support of many members of the Security Council to come to the open debate on the question of Middle East, which highlighted this issue of annexation. We managed to bring ministers from member state of the Security Council, including Minister of Foreign Affairs Retno Masurdi, which is quite popular in coming up with a very strong statement in support of the Palestinian cause. There are several other ministers. There is also a written statement from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of China, Russia. It was attended also by St. Vincent and Grenadines, as well as Tunisia, Vietnam, as well as others. So and South Africa. Just to show that in the council, we elevated the discussion at a higher level, which is the ministerial level, to show once again, this time around, this is not just a simple routine monthly meeting, but this is the risk of having this annexation. The pressure of having this annexation is so serious, and it will become a calamity for all of us. So unless the international community do something on this, it will become an issue that is so dangerous that it would not only affect the Middle East, but also affect other parts of the world. Now, on this particular issue, the Secretary General also have made many statements, and there is a report that has just come out from his special envoy Nikolai Mladenov. You can look at it in the website because it's quite a long report, but mostly all the violation that has been done by the Israeli. And one thing that I would like to underline also, that the Secretary General at the Security Council meeting last week stated, and I would like to quote it here: if implemented, annexation would constitute a most serious violation of international law, grievously harm the prospect of a two-state solution, and undercut the possibilities of a renewal of negotiation. I think these words, these sentences says it all. I mean, how dangerous it is, how it will kill the process of a two-state solution. And just to highlight again, his special coordinator, Nikolai Mladenov, the Secretary General Special Coordinator, also expresses and highlighted the immense risks we face over the coming weeks and months as we confront the very real possibilities of annexation and its consequences. Now, Nikolai mentioned it quite clearly, I quote, "This conflict has been marked by periods of extreme violence, but never before has the risk of escalation been accompanied by a political horizon so distant, an economic situation so fragile, and a region so volatile." So you can see from that clearly statement from Nikolai Mladenov, who is always in contact with all parties on the ground, how the situation is so fragile and dangerous. Just last point on the public statement also made just yesterday by the Human Rights High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet. She said that, I quote, "Annexation is illegal, period, whether it is 30% of the West Bank or 5%, unquote. She urged also Israel politicians to listen to its own former senior officials and generals, as well as the multitude of voices around the world, warning it not to proceed along this dangerous path. Basically, she mentioned a very, very strong message coming from the commissioner, High Commissioner for Human Rights. So not only government, member states of the Netherlands, but also members of parliaments. As you mentioned, there is this European Parliament, international expert, and civil society organization across the globe also constantly reiterate this position. And just to highlight also, there are letters from members of Congress and members of Senates of the US, of the United States, also sending letters to the White House on these particular issues. I think this is already public knowledge. But one thing to underline that this is not only a concern outside the United States, but also inside the United States. All this collective effort worked across various platforms and have made it clear to Israel and others that support it that annexation will not go unchallenged. I think this is the key word, that it should not go unchallenged. Now, just to finish by saying that my job is much easier than others diplomat, because in the case of Indonesia, the solidarity and support of the Indonesian people is not only in the basis of our constitution, but also it is a support by all the people, all layers of community, whether it's academician, whether it's the non-governmental organization, parliament, from all private sectors as well as all parts of the countries. They are all together in supporting the fight for Palestinian independence and freedom. And for me, as a diplomat, it is quite a clear marching orders here in New York to fight for the Palestinian cause. The beauty of our Indonesian society is that all of us are in it together in support of the Palestinian cause. And that's why I'm proud to say that we have Professor Din Samsudin here also that has been doing this, as well as other of our society. In closing, just to repeat what President Jokowi said when replying to a letter from Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in June of last year. I quote, "Palestine will always be in the hearts of the Indonesian people, and we will always support the Palestinian people's effort to realize their rights." I think I've said quite a lot, Ambassador Dino, but maybe in closing, I just would like to give a simple story, a grim picture of the ordinary civilian Palestinian on the ground. And this is what we heard in the Security Council, this story, how it posed detrimental condition to the people. This sad story is about what happened just last week on the 23rd of June. Another young Palestinian man lost his life when he was shot and killed by Israeli soldiers while passing through a checkpoint in occupied East Jerusalem to pick up his mother and sister from a beauty salon in Bethlehem just hours before his sister's wedding. After being shot in broad daylight, Ahmad Erekat, age 26, was left to bleed and die. His own wedding was supposed to take place next month. The trauma and grief of his family cannot be conveyed in mere words. How many more Ahmad, how many more Muhammad or Riyad or Iskandar or Palestinian boys and girls must die before we see peace in the horizon? I think this is a grim reminder for us all to do the right thing. I end on that very sad note, Ambassador, and thank you very much for having given me this fictitious opportunity. I hope I'm not too long.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador Atrian, for your very comprehensive overview of the situation and telling us about the state of international resistance with regard to this annexation plan. And also, thank you also for giving us the sense and the flavor of what is going on at the UN, especially the UN Security Council. And now would like to move to Ambassador Zuhair Al-Sun, the Ambassador of Palestine to Indonesia, who will give us the Palestinian perspective on this latest development. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
It's my pleasure. Good evening, everybody, Excellencies. I'm really happy to be with you this evening for this program, and very important program. I'm going, of course, to talk in my language, and my translator, he will deliver the speech directly. أصحاب السعادة المحترمين، أحييكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. وأنا حقيقة سعيد في هذه المشاركة معكم في هذا البرنامج الهام. الأخي من سبقني في الحديث سعادة السفير الإندونيسي، حقيقة يعني كانت كلماته معبرة مؤثرة وشاملة، وتناول القانون الدولي وموضوع حقوق الإنسان والقضايا ذات الاهتمام بالنسبة للقضية الفلسطينية. قضية فلسطين بلا شك أنها تحظى باهتمام شديد لدى إندونيسيا، لدى الشعب الإندونيسي، لدى الحكومة الإندونيسية، لدى وزيرة الخارجية التي أحترمها كل الاحترام، أقدرها كل التقدير، أعتبرها فلسطينية أكثر مني، وهذا ما قلته لها في عدة مناسبات، لأنها حقيقة تدافع عن الحق الفلسطيني، عن الرؤية الفلسطينية، عن الحقوق الوطنية الفلسطينية في كافة المحافل. وقبل أيام تحدثت في الأمم المتحدة وفي مجلس الأمن حول هذه الرؤية، وسبق ذلك أنها تكلمت مع وزير الخارجية الأمريكي بهذا الصدد، وأبلغته الموقف الإندونيسي تجاه مسألة الضم والمسائل الفلسطينية قاطبة. إخواني، أنا تطرق زميلي المتحدث الأول عن إجراءات الأكتيفيتيز التي تقوم بها إسرائيل على الأرض. هذه حقائق لا يستطيع أحد أن يتجاهلها قطعيا. إسرائيل ما يتابع النشاطات التي تقوم بها يوميا هي ضد الإنسانية، ضد حقوق الإنسان، ضد السلام، ضد مبدأ السلام الذي نتحدث عنه two state solution. لذلك أنا أؤمن كفلسطيني حقيقة، وبالرغم من أنني دبلوماسي ومتمرس، أؤمن أن إسرائيل غير محبة للسلام ولا تريد أن تتوصل إلى سلام. هذه قناعاتي من التجربة عبر 30 سنة في العمل الدبلوماسي واطلاعي على مجريات الأحداث. هذه الدولة المارقة لا تريد أن تصنع السلام على أرض السلام، أرض فلسطين. الآن أتينا إلى موضوع ما يسمى الضم Annexation الجديد. هو ليس جديدا، هو منذ الستينات مشروع إيجال ألون، من ثم في السبعينات شارون، وما بعد ذلك. هذه سياسة إسرائيل على مراحل. اليوم تتحدث عن القدس، تضم القدس. اليوم تنقل سفارة الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية إلى القدس. أمريكا تعلن أنها مدينة موحدة تحت السيادة الإسرائيلية. يتحدثون عن الاستيطان، هذه المستوطنات نريد أن نضمها، نريد التوسيع، هكذا إسرائيل تتعامل بالملفات. أنا بتقديري أصحاب السعادة الأخوة جميعا والمستمعين لهذا البرنامج، لو وضع حد لإسرائيل منذ البداية، منذ أن قامت بإجراءات تخالف القانون الدولي والشرعية الدولية والمطالب الدولية، لما وصلت إسرائيل إلى هذه المرحلة، ولما وصلنا نحن إلى هذا الوضع المأساوي الذي نعيشه على الأرض. إسرائيل كان من المفترض أن تعاقب ويوضع حد لها، وأن تحاسب وتسأل في المحافل الدولية على الجرائم، على المجازر التي ترتكبها، على المجازر التي ارتكبها قادة الجيش الإسرائيلي ورؤساء الحكومات السابقون والحاليون، شارون وأمثاله. لذلك لم يوضع حد لهذا الكيان الصهيوني للأسف الشديد. مسألة تأسيس وقيام دولة الاحتلال على أرض فلسطين التاريخية استندت إلى شهادة الميلاد الوحيدة، قرار التقسيم 181. لماذا لم يطبق هذا القرار وتسعى المجتمع الدولي ومجلس الأمن لتطبيق هذا المبدأ وفرضه على الأرض؟ لماذا تمادت إسرائيل وأخذت 22% من أرض فلسطين؟ كل ذلك حقيقة يهز في مشاعرنا، ونتساءل دائما: أين المجتمع الدولي؟ وأين الأمم المتحدة؟ وأين مجلس الأمن من هذه المسألة الهامة التي يجب أن تعالج في إطار القانون الدولي؟ تعلمون جيدا أيدينا ممدودة لصنع السلام. أبو عمار رحمه الله صافح رابين وقبل التسوية، واعترفنا بهم واعترفوا بمنظمة التحرير الفلسطينية. رابين كما تعلمون كان جادا في التوصل وإنهاء العديد من المسائل، فلذلك أتت يد الغدر المتطرفة الإسرائيلية وقتلته، وعادت الأمور إلى ما نحن نعيشه الآن. لذلك هذه التجربة تعطينا مؤشر أن إسرائيل غير محبة للسلام ولا تريد أن تصنع السلام، ولو أرادت لا اعترفت بالحقوق الوطنية والحقوق السياسية والحقوق الشرعية للشعب الفلسطيني على هذه المسألة. الآن الموضوع الهام الذي نتناوله موضوع الضم. موضوع الضم أولا من وجهة نظر العالم ووجهة نظري ووجهة نظر الشعب الفلسطيني وقيادته، إذا أقدمت إسرائيل على هذه الخطوة أسقطت مفهوم إقامة الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة بحدود 4 حزيران عام 67. هذا الهدف الذي تسعى إليه إسرائيل الآن في ظل ما يدور في هذا العالم، ما يجري في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية والدعم الأمريكي للأسف الذي قام به ترامب بدعم إسرائيل. وهذا حقيقة مفاجئ بالنسبة لنا، أن تقوم الولايات المتحدة بدل أن تكون دولة نزيهة أن تعمل على دعم إسرائيل بهذا الشكل. على كل حال، غور الأردن يا أخواني هو موقع هام جدا، والمناطق التي تريد إسرائيل السيطرة عليها تساوي 30% من أراضي الضفة الغربية المحتلة، وهي ستقضي على أهم محصول وأهم مكان لخصبة الزراعة وسلة الغذاء بالنسبة للفلسطينيين. تريد السيطرة على هذه الأمور وتسيطر على حدود نهر الأردن وتعزل هذه المنطقة عن تواصلنا مع المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية، والسيطرة على الأماكن السياحية، السيطرة على الأماكن الاقتصادية. لأهمية غور الأردن وأهمية هذا المكان المرتفع عن سطح البحر، كذلك السياحة الهامة في هذه المنطقة. من هنا أقول أصبح من الضروري على المجتمع الدولي وعلى مجلس الأمن، نحن نقدر المواقف الدولية التي حظيت الآن وتحركت بهذا الصدد في الاتحاد الأوروبي، في مجلس الأمن، في المنظمات الدولية، في OIC والاتحاد الإفريقي والجامعة العربية وغيرها من الدول المؤثرة والتي نادت بوضع حد لإسرائيل حول هذه الخطوة. نحن نبارك ذلك، ولكن من المطلوب أن تكون هناك إجراءات رادعة، إجراءات صارمة، إجراءات يتخذها الجميع من أجل وضع حد لهذا الكيان الإسرائيلي على هذه الأرض. لا أريد أن أطيل عليكم كثيرا لأن هناك ستكون ترجمة لهذه الكلمة، وسأترك المجال إذا هناك في أسئلة أخرى سنجيب عليها، وشكرا لكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
All right, I will start with the translation. Can you hear me, Ambassador Dina? His Excellency Ambassador Zuhair Al-Sun was conveying his sincere thanks to the organizing committee, especially for inviting him in this very important forum, which is to discuss the Palestinian cause. And His Excellency Ambassador Zuhair also has expressed that he is very happy to be here, participate in this very important discussion. Our previous speaker, Mr. Ambassador Dian, has spoken very clearly and has conveyed a very strong message and have presented a very comprehensive presentation with regards to the Palestinian cause. And what the things that the Ambassador Dian has spoken is definitely true. Nobody can deny it. The Palestinian cause, Mr. Ambassador, would like to highlight this, is the cause of the whole world, the cause of Indonesia, the cause of the Indonesian government and the Indonesian people, and the cause of our foreign ministry of Indonesia, especially Madam Minister Retno Marsudi. And Mr. Ambassador Zuhair Al-Sun always praised Madam Minister for being more Palestinian than him. Whenever Mr. Ambassador speaks with Madam Retno, we will say that you are Palestinian more than me. It means that the Palestinian cause is in the heart of the Indonesia and Indonesian people, Indonesian government. And okay, this is the reality that we are facing now. The issue of the annexation is the issue of annexation is actually not something new. It has been there from the beginning of the since the very beginnings of the colonialism of the Israel. This act of annexation is absolutely an violations of international law, and it's against the humanity, and it's against the human rights, and against most importantly against the peace process that's been built through this time. That's why, based on my experience as a diplomat in the world of diplomacy and as the ambassador, as my experience, I strongly believe that Israel seems to don't like any peace process. I mean, the Ambassador Zuhair Al-Sun is trying to say that Israel actually does not like the peace at all. That's why every action taken by the Israel is always violating the international law and international resolution. Not yet the issue of the settlement. The issue of settlement until today also has never been finished to talk about. And Mr. Ambassador Zuhair Al-Sun was saying that if Israel has never been given a chance from the beginning to do what it has done today, we will not reach to this stage. I mean, if from the beginning the international community was taking a very strong measures to to give strong protest to the Israel. Israel will not do what it has done today. And Mr. Ambassador Zuhair Al-Sun was highlighting about the partitions when the superpower country in the very beginning of history was opening a chance to the Israeli people to colonize the Palestinian land. There was the partition 181 which stipulated the two states, but why it was not implemented? So here, Mr. Ambassador Zuhair Al-Sun was questioning, where is the international community? Where is the human rights activists? And where are you all when the partition, the two states, the partition of the two states is not implemented? And His Excellency Ambassador Zuhair Al-Sun was saying that our hand, Palestinian people, Palestinian government is there and always ready for any peace process being conducted. But then again, Israel seems to be not ready for the peace process. And focusing more on the issue of the annexation, based on the Palestinian perspective, His Excellency Zuhair Al-Sun, if this annexation plan is taking place and happen, the main objectives of this plan is to erase the establishment of the future state of Palestine based on the border of 1967. And we are also very sad seeing the U.S. policy throughout these years, which seems to be very close to Israel and has never been a care of the Palestinian rights. This annexation, if taken place, will take approximately 30% of the West Bank area, and it will take the most important area for in the Palestine. Why this area is very important and very significant for the Palestine? Because this area is considered a very strategic area, which have the capacity and capability of agriculture capacity and water, and as well as the tourism. And this is what exists in the Jordan Valley through the borders of Jordanian and Palestinian borders. That's why we have to protect the Palestinian right over this land, because this land has the very economic potentials in the future. And His Excellency Ambassador Zuhair Al-Sun was also expressing his sincere thanks to the role of the international community, who had expressed their stance and their positions towards this issue, including the European Union and the OIC and other international community in other countries who have support the Palestinian cause, especially in this very difficult time. But then again, the statement, the political statement, the diplomatic statement is not sufficient if we highly rely on this whole statement. We need a very strong measures. We need a very strong measures to deter or to create some sort of deterrence to the Israel. Okay, I think after this, Mr. Ambassador Zuhair soon saying if there are any questions or discussions, please, most welcome. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much for that presentation on the Palestinian position. Before we move on to further questions, I'm sure there are a lot of questions will be addressed to the ambassador. I would like to request Pak Din Samsudin to give his presentation and comment. And Pak Din Samsudin, the microphone is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, Excellencies, Ambassador Jani, Ambassador Al-Shun, and Ambassador Dina Jalal, of course, and dear friends. Indeed, needless to say, because the very fundamental things have been said by both ambassadors, Ambassador Jani and Ambassador Al-Shun, as well as the opening remarks by Ambassador Dino Jalal. I think our very stand as a member of the international community of the peace and justice loving societies of the world, we totally reject the plan of annexation by Israel to the West Bank. We learn that this plan, as been mentioned in many articles, is just one part of the Trump's plan, which also calls on the creation of the demilitarization Palestinian state, largely encircled by Israel, with a capital outside of Jerusalem, which of course is rejected by the Palestinian and also by the peace and justice loving societies of the world. I don't want to repeat what have been said, especially by Ambassador Jani, but I don't want to underline that the plan of annexation of the West Bank by the Israeli government and troops is an unjustified act, illegal action, and in contradiction to the international law, but also heavy violation against human rights. I need to underline this one. And therefore, I would like to quote what has been written by more than 1,000 lawmakers in the Europe who sent a letter to the governments of the European Union that annexation will be fatal attraction to the prospect of Israeli-Palestinian peace and will challenge the most basic norms guiding international relations. And acquisition of the territory by force has no place in this modern era. But I'm really moved and share kind of envy with the lawmakers in Europe by seeing that this act of annexation must be prevented and if necessary with countermeasures. So really we are from Indonesia shameful with this action from the lawmakers in Europe, and therefore Ambassador Dino Jalal, I just want to share my views, and this is not only ideas but also have been our plan by all Islamic organizations in Indonesia, including all solidarities organization for Palestine who just met through a webinar this afternoon. Number one, we encourage all OIC member countries to unite mind and action and to take any concrete measures to stop the plan and to push the United Nations to enforce its solutions against Israel. And number two, from Indonesia, as chairman of the Indonesia-Palestine Friendship Initiative, we appreciate the best effort by our government through the Indonesian permanent mission in the UN, but we encourage our government to do its best, to continue its best effort for the cause of the Palestinian. Because as we know, this is a very message from the preamble of our Constitution, the 1945 Constitution, which stipulated at the first alinea paragraph, whereas freedom is the inalienable right of all nations. Colonialism must be abolished in this world, as it is not in conformity with humanity and justice. And therefore, we appreciate once again, as I listened to Ambassador Jani, so many good things have been done by our government, especially as a member of the Security Council. And therefore, also from Indonesia, we call upon all people of peace and justice loving people to share our solidarity and sympathy to the cause of the Palestinian. Lastly, I would like to report to Mr. Ambassador of the State of the Palestine that the Indonesia-Palestine Friendship Initiative, which was created in 2012, has done its effort. Number one, to give political support by encouraging our government, and also to extend our hand, though very little. We conduct fundraising 3 times, and we send it in accordance with the suggestion from the embassy and also Foreign Ministry through the UNRWA, United Nations Work Agency for Palestine, twice, and the third time via the special account in the office of President Abbas. And also we welcome and facilitated the visit of Palestinian artists 3 times to Indonesia, who perform in the big stadium, Istora, as well as in one auditorium of Muhammadiyah University in Yogyakarta. This is a kind of cultural diplomacy just to attract attention from our people in Indonesia to give more support for the cause of the Palestinian. And of course, we'll continue our effort and our struggle because we see that the global injustice in the area has encouraged many things in the Muslim world, but also outside the Muslim world, as well as the radicalization process, and also any kind of derivative of this global injustice performed together with the double standard by the United States in the Middle East. So thank you, Ambassador Dino. Wassalamualaikum.
Waalaikum salam, and thank you, Pak Din. I've known Pak Din for a long time, very long time, and he has always been very passionate about supporting the Palestinian cause. And so thank you for your efforts, Pak Din. So let's begin with our discussions. And I want to ask Ambassador Trian, why now? Yeah, why now? What explains the timing of this decision? Does the Israeli government want to take advantage of Trump while he's still in power, assuming he will lose the election in November? So let's just do it now while Trump will do anything that Israel says. So what is the reasoning for the timing, Ambassador, from your perspective?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, actually, you're asking a question that you're an expert on U.S. Foreign policies, Ambassador Dino, being an ambassador of Indonesia to the United States. I think you know clearly the answer to that question. And of course, timing is quite important. Actually, like I mentioned before, the effort by the Israeli is what I like to use the term as creeping annexation. Actually, they have been doing this slowly annexing every part of the occupied Palestinian territories by building those walls, by continuing enlarging the settlers, the Israeli settlers in many areas. So they have been doing it quite in the past for quite some time. I used to use this term actually when you know the song "Killing Me Softly." Well, they have been doing the "Killing Me Softly," but now it's simply "Killing Me Simply." So it's not softly anymore, but simply. So just to make it clear, if this annexation comes into being, it becomes something that are formalized. So this has a different ones altogether. And of course, taking the momentum of the peace deal, taking the momentum of every instances, including, as you know, there are several elections that has been undertaken in Israel. So this also becomes a political game within Israel itself. But I hope I've read just this morning from the New York Times. There are some politicians in Israel saying that it has not yet been decided upon. I hope that was a good news. But once again, this is nothing new. Simply trying to formalize it, as I mentioned before, killing me simply. So the question is not why it's being done now, but what should be done by the international community to ensure that this does not happen. I think that's the point that Professor Dean is also alluding to, and which we also agreed. And that's why we are mobilizing all our diplomatic support. We're working closely with our Palestinian brothers and sisters. I had a FPCI conversation with the Prime Minister of Palestine just a few weeks ago with the Committee on the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinians. So we're trying to enlarge, making it viral everywhere, and there are lots of FPCI. During COVID, there's a plus and minus during COVID. The negative part is that it's very hard to negotiate and to lobby and to get support here and there in terms of physical support. But on the other, the good thing about this COVID is that we are able to have FPCIs at different hours in every different time zone, and we are utilizing that mechanism in order to ensure that there are lots of people knows that this is not simply a Palestinian cause. This is a cause that has to be adopted by the rest of the world. And I can give you all the data that there are so many parliamentarians from all over part of the world, so many academicians, so many people are voicing the same thing, including lawyers, a group of lawyers, including the human rights expert in Geneva. So everybody is voicing. Now it's only up to the Israeli to listen if they really want to listen and to stop this plan of annexation. So I think I can. Well, one last point, Pak Dino, just to I forgot to express our sincere appreciation to Pak Din, Prof. Din actually. I rather call him Prof. Din and all the Islamic organization in Indonesia. We have been coordinating closely with the Foreign Affairs, and we have always listened. And we and I, for one, has always been looking at every instances to find. That gives me power, and that gives me spirit to continue my fight in the United Nations on this very important cause. So I think I leave it at that.
Ambassador Dino,
Yes,
may I
please.
spend this great moment meeting Ambassador Jani to ask him about the constellation and the configuration among the UN state members on this particular issue, and the possibility if the talk about the annexation will take place. And in particular, as a teacher of global political Islam at the UIN Jakarta, I would like to know the configuration among the Muslim countries or the OIC member countries on the issue of the Palestine currently, because there has been dynamic in the Middle East with regard to their support to the issue of the Palestinian. Thank you.
Ambassador Trian, please.
I feel like I'm in a doctoral examination now. Well, definitely Prof. Din knows much better on the configuration, but I can tell you, at least in the Security Council last year, we are working closely together with Kuwait as a member of the Security Council. In every move that we are making on this issue of Palestine, we are always together, Indonesia and Kuwait. And now, in terms of this 2020 membership of the Security Council, we are working with Tunisia. They're also a member of the OIC there, Niger. But as you know, once again, we in last February we have a joint resolution, draft resolution with Tunisia, and of course with close coordination with the Palestinian delegation here in New York. All in all, the statement is quite clear from every members of the OIC, condemning all the efforts of Israel. There has been an extraordinary meeting. The Arab League also mentioned it. Individually, countries in the Middle East, the Arab countries also is quite clear in their pronouncement that this act is against human rights, against international law, against humanity. So just to be clear on that, and we still have to continue to work on other parts of the world also. As a matter of fact, when we had this candidature for the Security Council last week, we had the election, and in the process of campaigning, the main question that I always pose to would-be candidate for the Security Council is, what is their policies, foreign policies on Palestine? That clearly is a litmus test of whether they are serious or not in becoming a member of the Security Council, because this is one of the long-standing issues and agenda of the Security Council. So if any countries that are wanting to be a member of the Security Council cannot give a firm answer on this issue of Palestine, then all the membership will be able to look as well as to vote or not vote for that particular country. So just to be clear, we do it in every avenue. We make sure that every efforts are being ensured and undertaken. This has been a long battle, and it will continue, hopefully, with an end result that is amicable and good for the Palestinian people.
Okay. Good. Let me now ask the ambassador a question, but also would like to get the comment of Ambassador Trian and Pak Din, also Professor Din, on this question. Ambassador Trian has said that if Israel goes on with this annexation plan, it will kill the two-state solution. And other international figures have said this also. I believe the ambassador of Palestine has also said this. My question is this. The two-state solution is important because that will be the basis for a future Palestinian statehood, right? That has always been the assumption that Palestine would gain its ultimate statehood, living in peace side by side with the state of Israel, right? So my question is, if the annexation kills the two-state solution, does it mean it also kills the future of Palestinian statehood? Ambassador? Yeah. Yeah.
Is it to Ambassador Zuhair? Is that question to Ambassador Zuhair?
Yeah, and to yourself, Ambassador Trian, but you can answer it first if you want, while Ambassador Zuhair prepares for the question, translated by the translator. Yeah, please, Ambassador Trian, go ahead.
As I mentioned, this is really a doctoral. I should have another doctoral also after this question. Thanks very much, Ambassador Dino. You're making my life not so easy this morning. As you know, this is early morning in New York anyway. On this question of the statehood, the answer is quite clear. Even just the idea of having a planned annexation, the Palestinian authorities already pronounced that they are not liable on any agreement that has been agreed upon. So that is already a move that is quite dangerous to the whole situation in terms of and once again, if this happens also, what would be the alternative? Is it the peace plan that was pronounced to have a one Jewish state with Jerusalem as the capital? So what happened to 5 million refugees that are now still in the camp? What happened to all those Palestinians that are inside there? So annexation, how could you have a country when you don't have a land anymore? And with this planned annexation, if it happens, where will we see the Palestinian people? Where are they going to reside? Where would be their homeland? This would create another problem again. So to answer your question simply, from my few points, that this annexation will certainly kill this idea of a future of a Palestinian state. Because you can't have a two states living together. Where will the other state live when they don't have any land? So that is the question now. And the issue is also, how far is the annexation? Is it only limited to the area that has been pronounced in the peace deal? Or will there be another inch going again, another inch, and at the end of the day, a zero land? This is a question that are what I used to word apocalypse or calamity. So it's something that I do not foresee. When one proceeds on this act of annexation, it also entails, like I mentioned before, a question of sovereignty, a question of international law. There are lots of ramification and multiplier effect, which is all negative, if I may say so, in my simple diplomatic words. So I think I leave it at that. Maybe Ambassador Zuhair can be more adept in answering this important question. I, for one, do not want to see this happen. If this happens, it's going to completely change the geopolitics of the world. And this is not a political chess made. We are talking about civilian. We are talking about humans. We are talking about people living. That's why I mentioned in my presentation by closing on the sad reminder of those sad story about Ahmad. But actually, there are lots of other sad stories, Dino. I can tell you, and this is not a sad story that I created by myself. This is a sad story that has been reported by Nicola Mladenov, the special coordinator of the Secretariat of the United Nations, into the Security Council. The story of demolition, the story of settlers killing normal Palestinian people on the ground, the story of children being killed in demonstration. And this is all happening, and this has been happening, but my problem is it's going to escalate in the future. So I can give you a long version of this answer, to be frank, but I think that encapsulates a little bit of what I feel on these issues. Not only as a diplomat, but as a human being, this is unacceptable. As simple as that.
Okay. Ambassador Zuhair, do you have any comment?
Yeah. حقيقة يعني أنا أولا أحيي أخي سعادة السفير وأقول له أن هذا التركيز عليك لمكانتك الدبلوماسية وإلمامك في المسائل الهامة. الواقع أخي الكريم وأصحاب السعادة أن في حالة أن الضم حصل لا يوجد خيار أمامنا سوى الاستمرار في المقاومة وإفشال المخططات الإسرائيلية على الأرض. هذا هو الخيار الوحيد أمام الشعب الفلسطيني. هناك أرض، هناك شعب، هناك حلم فلسطيني. لا يوجد بديل. لا يوجد بديل. إسرائيل تنتهز هذه الفرص وتستغل دعم أمريكا لها والظروف الدولية الآن في ظل هذا الوباء الكورونا الحاصل، ولكن كورونا الاحتلال على الشعب الفلسطيني أخطر من الكورونا الذي يحيط في هذا المجتمع. القيادة الفلسطينية وعلى رأسها الرئيس أبو مازن كان مفصله وكلمته النهائية في هذه المسألة. لا يمكن أن يقبل الشعب الفلسطيني دون أقل من ذلك. حدود 4 من حزيران يا أخواننا. فلسطين تاريخيا الجميع يعلم لمن هي، ولكن الظروف الدولية، المعطيات على الأرض، القوة فرضت نفسها. نحن ما زلنا موجودون على أرضنا، نقاوم، نقاتل بدعم الأحرار والشرفاء أمثالكم في هذا العالم لنفشل الحلم الإسرائيلي والمخطط الإسرائيلي الذين يريدون القيام بتنفيذه. إخواني، أنا لا أريد أن أكون أتحدث في العواطف. إسرائيل دولة قامت قصرا بالتاريخ، ولكن صاحب الحق سيأتي يوم وينتصر. طالما أن هذا الشعب وهذه الدويلة لا تريد أن تعيش بسلام فهي الخاسرة. هذه قناعاتنا وإرادتنا، ولذلك نقول للذين يحاولون التطبيع والركود نحو إسرائيل، نقول لهم تريثوا، لأن هذا لا يخدمكم ولا يخدم مصالحكم القومية ولا الوطنية. هناك شعب يرزخ تحت الاحتلال، هناك شعب يعاني. يوميا توجد قصة يا أخوان، يوميا توجد هناك حالة شهيد، أسير، تدمير بيت، اعتقال، يوميا. من يتابع التلفزيون الفلسطيني والحيثيات الفلسطينية يدرك تماما ما هي إسرائيل. ولذلك أقول لكم أيها الإخوة أن هناك مثل في بلادنا يقول القوي عايب، وإسرائيل قد تقدم على خطوات أكثر من ذلك، ولكن لا تستطيع أن تقضي على إرادة الشعب وعلى صلابة الشعب وعلى ما يتمناه الشعب على هذه الأرض. كلكم يعلم وكلكم من تابع the uprising in 1987. 5 years Ishaq Rabin have been defeated. All Israeli soldiers have been defeated. And then Oslo agreement have become, the result or the outcome of that uprising, and everybody knows the story. لذلك الشبل الفلسطيني والمقاتل الفلسطيني والإرادة الفلسطينية والأم الفلسطينية ستهزم هذا الكيان آجلا أم عاجلا. شكرا.
Okay, I trust there's a translation. Thank you, Ambassador. There's a translation to what Ambassador said.
Yes, yes, Ambassador Dino. First of all, His Excellency Ambassador Zuhail was appreciating the Ambassador Dian for his very warm word and comprehensive explanations and overview on the Palestinian cause. And this is the reality. If the annexation is taking place, or if it happens, actually the Palestinian people don't have any other choice except to continue the struggle. Because why? Because what we can hope from the world, the US as the hegemonic power, as the superpower country in the world, cannot help to create the peace over this conflict. And it's very clear to us that he is a close ally of the Israel. And the international system, we cannot hope very much from that. That's why if the annexation plan is taking place and if it happens, the Palestinian people will not have other choice except to continue to struggle for their legitimate right to be independent and to be free from the colonialism. The Palestinians or Palestinian people will not accept less than the border of 1967. Despite of all of the compromises over this long that the Palestinian Authority has accepted, but less than the border of 1967, we will not accept it. And His Excellency Ambassador Zuhair was saying that he didn't want to be very emotional talking about this, but he firmly believes that Israel will eventually disappear. So His Excellency Ambassador Zuhair was touching on the fact that there are now today some countries that already started talking about the desire to establish or to normalize the relations with this entity or this Israel. But please bear in mind that whoever takes this step is actually the biggest loser. And Ambassador Dian was mentioning about the sad stories about Ahmad, about Iyad. But actually, His Excellency Ambassador Zuhair Al-Sun was telling us that there is everyday a story or an issue in the Palestine. If you're following the news, if you're following the reports, every day we're facing the problem, every day we're facing the issue in the Palestine. The issue of resettlement, killing the innocent people, and many more. There is an Arabic phrase saying that powerful one will disappear. One day will disappear. So the ambassador Zuhair Al-Sun believes that no matter how much the Israel powerfulness is, but he believes that Israel one day will disappear, and the will of the Palestinian people will fail every step taken by the Israel occupying power. The Israel cannot determine the future of the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people are the ones who have the legitimate and the absolute right to decide and to determine their own future. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador Dino.
Thank you. We only have a few minutes left. Then I would like to ask questions that were asked by some of our viewers. We have, first of all, Hendra Manurung from UNPAD. And I think his question can be asked by both Ambassador Trian and Pak Din. His question is, Israel has always been very stubborn in defying international law, and it continues to do what it wants to do. So the question is, if we face a country or government with that kind of attitude and predisposition, what is it that Indonesia can do in the face of such stubborn Israeli attitude or aggression? So that's the question for Ambassador Trian and Professor Din. And the other question is from Bayu Muhammad from University of Indonesia. He asks, what is the Ambassador Zuhair's comment on the Arab political parties that are in the Israeli parliament? You know, what is their attitude on the Israel's annexation plan? Yeah. So those are the two questions before we end this session. Yeah, Ambassador Trian, you may want to go first. What can Indonesia do in the face of such stubborn Israeli attitude that will stop at nothing? Yeah.
As you know, Ambassador Dino, in our Indonesian culture, we have to make sure that our seniors get the first
okay.
answer. So Professor
Sure.
Din, I would not like to.
Please, Professor Din, you can go first. Yes.
I feel I'm younger than Ambassador Johnny. my face is older than the age. I bear in mind that the stubborn man should be faced by a stubborn person. But for sure, yeah, the process of peace as well as the future of peace in the region is indeed, questionable, because the two-state solution plan has failed, in my opinion. Soon, Donald Trump self-announced the move of the embassy to Jerusalem. But no other ways except, in my opinion, is that the Muslim countries as well as the Arab countries should unite in order to elevate the bargaining position and the political leverage of the Palestinians in the negotiation and the peace talk process. But this is the internal problem of the Muslim world as well as Arab countries. I think Saudi Arabia, Jordan, United Emirates Arab, as well as Qatar, Egypt, should make use their good relationship with the United States in order to elevate the bargaining position as well as the political leverage of the Arab people and the Muslim world in the issue of Israel. Otherwise, I think the annexation and will followed by another annexation, and then we are optimistic about the future and the viability of peace in the region, and therefore maybe another faction of the Palestinian will see it, and the Latin proverb, sivi pacem para bellum. If you want peace, prepare the war. Of course, we don't like this. We still maintain optimisms on the future of peace in the region, but with prerequisite that's the consolidation within the Muslim world, within the Arab world, by attracting other countries, peace and justice-loving countries as Russia, China, and Europe Union, and to support this cause. That's my opinion, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you, Ambassador Trian. And by the way, it's not just the stubborn Israel, it's also stubborn President Trump, who will, once he wants something, he will stop at nothing to get what he wants. Yeah, Ambassador Trian, please.
Well, I completely agree with what Professor Dean mentioned. That's why I gave him the floor first. It's easier just to agree with him. But to add what he's saying, it's not only Israel that can be stubborn. We also, Indonesia, are very stubborn, and we are also tenacity. We keep on fighting, and this fight has been going on and on. We will even dare to fight alone. I was ready to fight alone, and I mentioned this in various occasions in the Security Council, because what we are fighting is a question of principle. It's not question of religious. It's not. And one thing that I would like to underline, Dino, because some people are also questioning these issues in various parts of the world, that this is a religious issue. No, it's not. It's a political issue. It's a human rights issue. It's an economic, social issue. I just would like to tell a story. I met during my vice presidency in the SERP, in the UN Committee on Palestine, when I was traveling. I met a mayor from Bethlehem, the city of Bethlehem. She is Palestine. She is a Christian Palestine. So including Palestine, you have Muslim, you have Christian, you have different denomination here and there. But what we're fighting is for the freedom of the people of Palestine. And that is one thing that I would like to make clear also here. And that's why we are also stubborn in trying to pressure Israel. Look, what you are doing is not right. What you are doing is against human rights. And I agree not only in trying for us to have a solidified member of the international community, we have the legal rights, because under Resolution 2334, there is paragraph that clearly states that calls on all states to distinguish their relevant dealings between the territory of Israel and the territories occupied since 1967. And another paragraph which states that no state shall uphold violation of Israel or offer support in any way to such violations. The word offer support. So if we are really, for those that are still undecided, and if those countries are human rights loving or peace loving countries, we should all be together in trying to ensure exercise the utmost pressure to Israel. For instance, we have also stated this in many occasions on the needs of embargo, for instance, or displacement, or trying to make sure that we recognize the state of Palestine. For Indonesia, there's no problem on that, but there are countries that are still not recognizing this. So if they are really serious and they think this is a serious issue to the world, then you have to walk the talk. I'm not talking very tough here, but I'm talking from my own heart and feelings, because this is an issue, like I mentioned, this is an issue of Ahmad, of Riyadh, of Mansour, of every single Palestinian brother and sister. And I must say, Ambassador Zuhair, you have the easiest job as ambassador of Palestine in Indonesia, because you have the support of all the people of Indonesia, as opposed to many of your ambassador colleagues in other countries in Europe, for instance. At least in Indonesia, you have all of our supports in any way possible. So just by making it clear that on that question, we are also stubborn, Ambassador Dino, and I will continue to be stubborn. And if you've seen my statement in various, in the General Assembly, I made a statement 2 years ago in the Indonesian language, and that was the first statement that was made in the Bahasa Indonesia in the United Nations. And my statement is quite clear. Saya tidak akan menyerah, mundur sejengkal pun untuk kemerdekaan Palestina, which clearly says I will never retreat until I see the independence of Palestine. I don't know if I'm very emotional on this. What can I say? I'm only an Indonesian diplomat that have been taught and disciplined on fighting for the need for people under oppression, for fighting for the independence. And that is in our constitution, that is in our blood since 1945, and that will continue to be the blood in the blood of all of our diplomats everywhere. So just to make it clear on that, I'm sorry if I'm a bit patriotic or emotional on this issue.
Ambassador Dino, I'm really moved and like the statement from Ambassador Jani that we can be stubborn as well. And I learned Persian language that Jani in Persian language is John means young. So Johnny, a person with young spirit. That fit him.
But a little bit, Ambassador Dino, Professor Dean, in the Urdu language and the Hindi language, Jani means darling. So you better watch out also.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for those comments. For the last comment, I will give to Ambassador Zuhair to the question from from Bayu Muhammad. Are the Arab political parties in the Israeli parliament? What is their position on this?
شكرا أخي الكريم. أولا إحنا إذا أردنا أن نتحدث عن العلاقة الفلسطينية الإندونيسية نريد يعني جلسة منفصلة لنتناول هذا الموضوع بأهميته وبعمقه، لأنها حقيقة علاقات تاريخية وعلاقات مؤثرة بين الشعبين وامتداد طويل. والدعم الإندونيسي لفلسطين يعني إحنا حقيقة نحترمه ونقدره. وأنا كسفير لدولة فلسطين سعيد أنني أكون في هذا البلد لما شاهدته من تواصل ومن تعاون ومن حركة دعم في هذا الاتجاه. الموقف العربي يعني كما أشار له أخي في مجلس الأمن وفي المنظمات الدولية هو موقف ليس بالبعيد عن ذلك. المواقف العربية من المسألة القضية الفلسطينية تحظى بالدعم الكامل وبالتأييد الكامل من الأحزاب العربية ومن الحكومات العربية المعلنة. هذا هو الواقع. ويا إخوان، مبادرة السلام العربية الكل مجمع عليها أنها هي القاعدة الأساسية من أجل صنع السلام والتوصل إلى سلام مع الكيان المحتل. الذي أريد أن أركز عليه في نهاية كلامي الاتحاد. القوة تصنع الاتحاد. إخواني، هذه المجموعة الإسلامية ومنظمة التعاون الإسلامي 57 دولة إذا اتحدت وإذا أخذت موقف تغير مجريات التاريخ وتغير، لأن المصالح تلعب دور. أمريكا ستهتز وكثيرا من الدول سوف تهتز بما فيها إسرائيل. لذلك أقول أننا ما زلنا قادرون على إعادة الخريطة السياسية إلى وضعها الطبيعي من خلال اتحادنا وقوتنا وثواتنا. وشكرا لكم جميعا.
معذرة سعادة السفير، السؤال كان يقول ما هي تعريفاتكم للحزب السياسي للعرب في البرلمان الإسرائيلي وما هي مواقفهم في هذه القضية؟
عيد السؤال.
كان السؤال يقول ما هي تعريفاتكم الحزب السياسي للعرب في البرلمان الإسرائيلي وما هي مواقفهم تجاه هذه القضية؟
نعم. أولا الفلسطيني 48 وأعضاء الكنيست هم أبدأوا موقف معلن وقاموا باتخاذ بيانات ومسيرات ومظاهرات ترفض هذه الخطوة الإسرائيلية وترفض ما ستقدم عليه حكومة إسرائيل في مسألة الضم، ويعتبروا أنهم سوف يقاتلون إلى آخر لحظة من أجل إقامة الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة وعاصمتها القدس. هذا موقف الأعضاء البرلمان الكنيست العرب 16 الموجودين داخل الكنيست الإسرائيلي.
Okay. Right, Ambassador Dino. First of all, the Ambassador Suhail was talking about if we want to talk about the relations between Indonesia and Palestine, of course, we will need spirited time, and it will take a very long time since our relations between the two countries are very historical and very strong relations. And talking about the general view on the Arabs' positions, not yet talking about the political party of Arabs in the Israeli parliament, the ambassador was talking about Arabs in the general, Arabs' positions, meaning that the Arabic countries. The Arabs' position is very clear. It's very clear in support of the Palestinian cause. And also, His Excellency Ambassador Zuhair was talking about the importance and the significance of being united towards each other, especially in the Muslim world and especially among the Arab community. The unity will create a power. If all Arab and Muslim countries all over the world are united, it will create some sort of deterrence to even to the power country like the United States. So to answer the questions about the positions and His Excellency's comment on the political party of Arabs in the Israeli parliament, for the information that they are 16% of them in the Israeli parliament, and so far the positions on this current issue is very clear, which is supporting the Palestinian people, and they even have conducted some kind of demonstrations in the Israel, and they also to show their support over the Palestinian cause, particularly in this current issue. They also even say that we will fight until the end to achieve the goal, to achieve our goal to establish the future of Palestinian state. This is what Ambassador Zuhair said, Ambassador Dino.
Actually, I was talking about Islamic countries' unity, not Arab countries' unity, and 57 countries Islamic under OIC They can change the history. They can change the era. Even the America can be able to follow what all Muslim countries are able to decide.
Okay, thank you very much. I would love to continue this conversation, but I think we have run out of time. I want to thank our speakers, Ambassador Trianjani. I've been trying to get him to speak at FPCI Forum for forever. I've been sending him bribes like the dates, korma, and but so everything. Today, I finally succeed in getting him. So thank you very much. Professor Din Samsudin, my guru also. Thank you very much for your gracious remarks to this discussion. And of course, our good friend, Ambassador Zuhair Al-Sun, thank you so much for your very frank and enlightening remarks. To all those who are listening to us, thank you. Hope you enjoyed our discussions, and I want to wish everybody a good evening and a safe days from the threat of COVID-19, and especially to our friend Ambassador Trianjani. We wish you all the best in your fight in New York for the benefit of the Palestinian people and for peace in the Middle East and around the world. Once again, thank you for taking part, and I hope to see you again and stay healthy. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.